Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. So I thought about speaking today in regard to our good friend here at Basaro, who's going to be pretty soon leaving for the UK to hopefully fairly soon after that pursue the higher ordination. So I thought I'd talk a bit about what the meaning of ordination and sangha and bhikkhuhood is. First of all, we borrow all these terms from Christian monasticism when they're used in English, like ordination and monk, and none of those terms are really exactly equivalent to what's meant in the Buddhist tradition. The word monk, English word, comes from a Greek root meaning solitary, and the original Christian monks were solitary hermits. Though later they developed communities. The meaning of the word is a solitary hermit. Whereas bhikkhu derives from a word meaning, well, the most literally it means a lump of food, and bhikkhu means a beggar, one who lives by lumps of food. That they're gotten on alms round and given by the lay community. And this here is precisely one difference between the Buddhist and Christian conceptions of monasticism. I at one time was visiting a Christian monastery and being given a tour, and they had a workshop where they were processing cheese. That was like their kind of economic thing they did, was selling cheese. And they told me that Saint Benedict, who established the rules for the order, he said that you have to always be useful. Without work, you don't eat. And monks always have to do something useful. I said that's very interesting, because our rule says we have to be useless. We're not allowed to do any kind of economic activity. It doesn't mean we don't work. Generally we, especially in a place like this that's kind of rough-edged, we tend to work a lot and around our own monastery, but we're not allowed to buy and sell or have like an external economy. We have to live entirely on dana, the free gifts of others. And the Buddha set it up that way deliberately. That's built right into the rules, so that the monastic community is always dependent on the laity for its support and its survival. And there's good reasons for that. One is precisely to prevent the monks from becoming hermits, because a lot of the men who become bhikkhus would have a natural inclination to just get a big bag of rice and disappear into the cave in the forest and never be seen again. And the Buddha wanted this interchange so that his teachings would be known in the broader community, not just to a small number that chose to disappear. And the other thing is to keep the monks honest. The lay people are the ultimate support of the monks, and if the monks are misbehaving, then the lay people can withdraw their support. So that the monks have to be immediately dependent on the lay community. And it's a symbiotic relationship, and it's beneficial to both sides. And the monks serve as a field of merit. This in the chanting that we do of the qualities of the Sangha. One is Anutarang Punya Ketang Lokasati, an unsurpassed field of merit in the world. So when the monks go on alms round, as we do in Buddhist countries, and you walk through the village with your bowl, the monks are providing a service to the lay people and giving them an opportunity to make merit. So the monks are organized, or the bhikkhus are organized into Sangha, which is the community of monks. And the Buddha said that in the past, in previous Buddhas, some of them, their teachings lasted a long time, and some of their teachings did not. Their teachings didn't survive for very long after their deaths. And the reason for the difference is whether they set up a organized Sangha or not as a vehicle for the perpetuation of the tradition and the teachings. And the Buddha did. He established a Sangha, and the word Sangha means community. He set up a community of the bhikkhus, and it's a worldwide community. We talk about the Sangha of the four quarters, meaning all the bhikkhus everywhere, four quarters and 3 times, including the bhikkhus of past and future. So, for example, when we build a kuti, we don't build it for ourselves, even if we intend to use it ourselves. It's not our property. It belongs to the Sangha of the four quarters and the 3 times. Likewise, the robe and the bowl are always considered Sangha property that we're using, we're borrowing, or have the use of. And the thread that holds the Sangha together is the Vinaya, which is the collection of not only the rules themselves are the Patimokkha, is a subsection of the Vinaya. The Vinaya as a whole is the organizational structure of the Sangha. And the Vinaya texts are actually fairly lengthy, and they deal with not only the rules, but with procedural matters of how the Sangha is to be organized and conduct its business. And the monks are to meet frequently and deal with their affairs in a certain formulaic way. The Sangha also has incorporated the rule or tradition of seniority, which is a way of dealing with the hierarchy in the community. So there's never any power struggle for who's in charge or who's senior. It's whoever was ordained first is senior. So there's no disputing that. At one time, during the Buddha's lifetime, 3 of his relatives, who were noble Katyans, went for ordination. They all were inspired by his talks, and they went to seek ordination. And they brought their barber, who's a low caste. Barber was a low caste occupation. They brought the barber along to shave their head before they took the vows. And the barber got inspired too, and also asked for ordination. And the Buddha made a point of ordaining him first, so he'd always be senior to the 3 nobles for the rest of their lives. They'd have to bow to him, and he'd sit in the front of the line. So it's a very beautiful and elegant way of dealing with the natural power dynamics of human communities. There's no such thing as an absolutely egalitarian community. There's always power power dynamics going on, and so the Buddha just had it, okay, just by seniority, we'll just do it that way. So there's no disputing of it. The entrance into the community is two-stage process. The first is pabaja, which means the going forth, which Abhisaro has already done. So then he becomes a samanera, a novice. It's the first stage of entry into the Sangha. At the second stage is the full entrance, is the Bhikkhu Ordination. And ordination is another word borrowed from Christian usage. In the Christian tradition, ordination means that a person is given a sacred character to become a priest. And that's not really what's meant by Bhikkhu ordination. The word in Pali is Upasampada, which means admittance. It's the admittance of a person into the community. And the ceremony for the Upasampada of a new bhikkhu physically manifests that, in that the bhikkhus who are performing the ceremony sit in a semicircle or horseshoe arrangement, and the new postulant stands outside, and there's some chanting back and forth, which is the questioning to see if he's qualified, and he seeks admittance, and then they admit him into the circle, and then he's accepted. He becomes accepted as a member of the community. He has to answer a series of questions. It's all done in Pali. He has to answer a series of questions to show that he's qualified. There's also a female Sangha, the Bhikkhuni Sangha, but we're talking about the Bhikkhu Sangha here. So one of the questions is, are you male? Another one is, are you human? Manusosi. That's to keep the Nagas out, because there was a kind of a bad incident with a Naga that tried to ordain early on, reverted to his snake form, and caused trouble. So after that, the Buddha said only human beings. So, are you human? Then a series of diseases. Are you free of these diseases? So, and we're not really 100% sure what the diseases they're referring to from the Pali, but it's probably things like leprosy, contagious or diseases. And are you free of debt? And are you not subject to military service? So there's these series of questions that make sure that the postulant is qualified, and then he's given the bowl and the 3 robes. The novice has 2 robes. And generally, like, I'm just wearing 2 robes now, but we have a 3rd robe for a bhikkhu, is the sangati, which we tend to just wear over our shoulder, although you can also wear it. The original intention was as a cold weather garment, although it wouldn't be sufficient in this climate. It's a double thickness robe like this one, but double thickness. And in our tradition, we tend to mostly use it ceremonially, like for formal Sangha occasions. We wear it folded up over our shoulder. And that's the 3rd robe, and that's the mark of a bhikkhu. Otherwise, there's no really distinguishing visible mark between a samanera and a bhikkhu. But the bhikkhu is subject to the full Patimokkha rules, the 227 rules, whereas samanera only really has 10. Most of the major relinquishments are already done at the samanera stage, but the bhikkhu is, for example, not allowed to store food and has to have food offered. So I think one of the really important and actually quite beautiful things about the Sangha, the Bhikkhu Sangha, is as a living vehicle of the tradition. Any bhikkhu, like myself, at some point in my life I was ordained by a community of bhikkhus, including the senior one who acts as the preceptor. And at some point in his life, he was ordained by a group of bhikkhus and a preceptor. And the chain goes unbroken all the way back to the Buddha. So it's a series of human contacts of these ordination ceremonies all the way back to the Buddha. When the Buddha first established the order of bhikkhus, the initial ordination ceremony was very simple. It's called the Ehi Bhikkhu Ordination. Ehi means come here. And that the whole ceremony was, if someone asked, may I join the Sangha, the Buddha would just say, Ehi Bhikkhu, come here, Bhikkhu. And that was it. That was the whole ceremony. And according to the commentaries, when the Buddha said that, the person miraculously lost all his hair and got robes. It's like poof. But the Ehi Bhikkhu ceremony only was effective while the Sangha was small and everyone was in immediate physical contact with the Buddha. Once they started expanding, there had to be some more institutional structure to keep things from going, completely haywire. And the ordination ceremony as we have it now was gradually developed so that the Buddha didn't need to be present. It could be done by a committee, a Sangha of monks. And originally it was 10 bhikkhus required to do an ordination, and it's theoretically under the Vinaya, it still is in the Majjhima Padesa, which is the middle country, which means the Ganges Valley. The rest of the world is like the barbarian outlands. And when the bhikkhus started to spread further afield beyond the Ganges Valley, they were finding it difficult. A number of the rules were difficult to maintain outside the valley, and the Buddha made a number of exceptions. Okay, outside of the middle country you can do this, and you don't have to follow that rule, and so on. And one of the most important ones of those is the ordination only requires 5 monks outside of the Majjhima Padesa. So most of the ordinations in the world today, they have that quorum of 5 monks. There's often more present, but they're not necessary. There must be 5. So there is this direct institutional and human link all the way back to the Buddha. And it's been spread from its original source in the Majjhima Padesa. It's spread over not only the length and breadth of India, but into other countries in Asia and eventually overseas to here we are in northwestern Ontario. It's spread all over the planet, but it all traces back to those initial establishments by the Buddha. And although there is this direct linkage, you can see it like a tree growing from a root. There's also been branches where there's historically been various splits, often due to geographical separation. So you have various lineages of bhikkhus. And these Vinaya lineages, this is something that's a little bit obscure, and I don't think a lot of people understand this. The Vinaya lineages are not the same as the Dhamma lineages. We know different schools of Buddhism like the Theravada and the Zen and Vajrayana, but that's to do with Dhamma transmission. The transmission of the ordination lineages is often different and overlaps. It happens that the Theravada ordination lineage and the Dhamma lineage overlap, although there's some issues there too, in that there's been various splits in the different Theravada countries. In Thailand, they have the Dhammayuts and Mahanakais. There's 2 orders of monks that don't fully recognize each other's ordination lineage, although they have no problem with the Dhamma teachings are the same. That it doesn't really concern lay people at all. They have not, it doesn't. Lay people would not consider themselves to be Mahanakai or Dhammayut, but it's a big deal for the monks. You probably aware of the episode in Ajahn Chah's biography where he stayed with Ajahn Mun for a short time, like a week, and he said that was formative in his teaching. The reason he didn't stay longer was because Ajahn Mun was Dhammayut and Ajahn Chah was Mahanakai, and they were coming up to the Patimokkha ceremony, and it would cause a kerfluffle if there's a Mahanakai monk in the monastery at the time of the Patimokkha ceremony. So out of politeness, he left so as not to cause trouble. I've also heard that Ajahn Chah asked Ajahn Mun, "Do you think I should reordain as a Dhammayut?" And Ajahn Mun said, "No, the Mahanakai need good monks too. Just carry on as you are." They also have these ordinations split in Sri Lanka. There's 4 lineages in Sri Lanka. These are entirely historically based on some disputed succession at some point in history. The one in Thailand was started with the reign of King Monket. He was a very devout Buddhist. He'd been a monk. He wasn't expected to ordain to the throne, but when they called him to become king, he disrobed and became king. And one of his main projects was to reform the Sangha, because he'd seen as a monk that there was some corruption and misbehavior in the Sangha. So he wanted to start a lineage of pure monks. So he found some group of monks out in the periphery of the country that he decided were pure, and he used them to start ordination ceremonies for this new order of Dhammayuts. They're a minority in Thailand, but they tend to be like upper class people support them, and the royal family and so on. The Mahanakai is more like the broader, the name itself means the big group. They're like the broader general run of bhikkhus. But in general, there is a very deeply rooted conservatism in the tradition that has enabled it to survive for so many centuries, that we don't make changes or innovations. The Vinaya cannot be changed until the next Buddha comes and he'll make his own Vinaya. But nobody has the authority to change the rules of the Vinaya. So, for example, I don't know, it's about a decade ago now, I guess, there was a huge controversy in the Buddhist world about female ordination. The Bhikkhunis and the Ajahn Chah tradition wouldn't do Bhikkhuni ordinations and still won't do it. And a lot of people were upset at the time, thinking, this is a human rights and women's rights and whatnot. But the internal discussion within the Sangha is entirely about Vinaya. Is this, it's not whether it's a person's right to ordain, but do these ordinations accord with the rules of the Vinaya? Can it be legally accepted? And in general, I think the Thai Sangha is even more conservative than many others. They've never had a Bhikkhuni Sangha really established in Thailand, and so they didn't. They saw it as an innovation, and they're always on the guard to prevent innovations, because they want to keep the purity of the tradition. So, I like to say we don't jump on every passing fad like trousers. So, it's just because it's passing fad. We wait a while. One kind of interesting example of the innate conservatism that underlies all these Buddhist traditions in maintaining their lineages are in the robes. I went to a Buddhist conference once. It was intermonastic conference, like it was Theravadins and Zens and Chinese Mahayana and Tibetan and all kinds of monks and nuns there. And we had one workshop in comparing robes. And how is your tradition? What kind of robes do you have and wear? And that was very interesting. And there's quite a lot of difference in terms of color and actually cut even. But there was one thing that was absolutely the same right across all the traditions. Thai, they call it the kusis. It's these folded lines in the robe. And even there was a Zen priest there. They call themselves priests. A Zen priest. Their entire robe was really just the sangati down to a miniature form. Like they had this thing they hang over their shoulder, to signify that they're, on duty. And it has the kusis in it. And everybody, no matter what color robes they have or whatever, they have these. And the origin of that is given in the Vinaya books, that the monks' robes were originally rag robes. They would sew them together from bits of cloth found or begged bits of cloth, smaller pieces. Nowadays they tend to get big rolls of cloth and make the robes on sewing machines, but we still fold them over and make the kusis. But they were originally to join pieces of cloth. And the Buddha specified the pattern that they were to use. And he said, it's like the rice fields of Magadha. If you took an aerial view of rice fields, there's these dikes, right? A network of dikes, and this is the kusis on the robes are the rice fields of Magadha. So this has been passed on. Now this little detail of procedure has been passed on and survived in all these different branches and lineages all over the place. And the purpose for the existence of the Sangha is ultimately for creating an optimal condition for the realization of Nibbana. One goes forth, leaves the home life in order to pursue the spiritual quest of realizing the unconditioned. The whole institution sprung from the fully awakened mind of the Buddha. That's the seed, the seed of the whole thing. So this Aryan noble truth, this penetration of reality, the awakened mind of the Buddha gave us the Dhamma as an expression of ultimate truth, and the Sangha as a vehicle. So often in the text, it's said that the Dhamma Vinaya as a compound is one word, because the two. This is the teaching of the Buddha. It's the Dhamma Vinaya. And the whole tradition of the Buddha is called the Sasana. Roughly what we would call in English the Buddhist religion is the Sasana or the Buddha Sasana. So when an individual takes that Upasampada ceremony, they're joining this community, which is not only it is to start with the community of your immediate Sangha, those monks who are sharing your immediate life, but it's also the Sangha of the four quarters. It's a worldwide Sangha, and in the broadest sense it includes all the other lineages too, because they all spring from the same root. And it's also the Sangha of the three times. You become a living link from the time of the Buddha. You have a connection directly back to the time of the Buddha. And forward, going forward, you then are keeping that tradition alive. And I always think that's one of the most important duties of a bhikkhu, is to keep that flame that was lit by the Buddha, to keep it uncorrupted and pure and passed on in its original form as much as possible. And the transmission from the Buddha to the present is not as remote as all that. If you could count up the individual links, I did this once and now I can't remember what I come up with. I think it was about 200 steps maybe back to the Buddha. So if you could gather all the acharyas in a lineage together, you could fit them into a medium-sized hall. 200 people. That's not a lot. That's the transmission from the Buddha to us at present. And the Upasampada ceremony is the admission into that Sangha of the 4 quarters and the 3 times. So it's something of that has an ordinary significance as a formality in the world. It establishes a certain status in the world, a certain position, but it also has a cosmic significance in that you're connecting in a very direct, human, immediate way with the Buddha and with all the noble ones and the whole tradition. It's a one-to-one human links that tie it all together. So I could just wish all the best to Abhisaro, beginning on this great adventure, or the next step in this great adventure. And hopefully your bhikkhu life will be fruitful and you will realize Nibbana this very lifetime.